Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening. Welcome to the VR Pair. I am your host, Canadian Glenn, and it is March 14th, 2018. If you're in Canada and you had any sort of news channel on your computer or your television this last Saturday, chances are you saw the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario Leadership Convention. Interesting, to say the least. Ontario has an election on June 7th, a fixed election date. Pretty close to an election to elect a new leader, right? Yes, it is. But, there are some special circumstances. This is the latest in what will be a series on the Ontario election. Welcome back tonight, Dave Glover. He does this for way more hours a week than I do, but I'll let him explain the particulars. We had 4 candidates by the time it came time to vote, with the ranked ballot system that gave us Andrew Scheer. We got Doug Ford. Interesting, you say. Yeah, that's one way to put it. There's a million angles to look at. The cause, why they needed this leadership convention. The candidates, the voting system. The one debate they had. That was it. That's all they had time for. The results of the vote, and what happens now. Hang on, get your popcorn. Without further ado, I will welcome our guest tonight. Hello, Dave.
How you doing, Glenn? Hi, how are you?
Very good. Very good. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Oh, it's my pleasure, absolutely. Welcome to your listeners.
So, how much viewer enjoyment did you get out of TV last Saturday?
Well, I didn't watch it. I watched it actually on Twitter. TVO on Twitter. I don't have cable. I cut the cord a while ago, so we get our TV through another source, if you will.
Very good, very good.
But no, it was. I just want to correct you on one thing. They actually had 2 leadership debates.
Oh, I'm sorry.
One was just before the final debate. I believe was on the Wednesday before, if I remember correctly. They had the one debate. They had a debate on TVO. Mm-hmm. And then there was another one, I believe, CBC broadcast, the CBC Toronto. But yeah, they had the 2 debates. The first debate was considerably more cordial than the second one. They really sort of got into one another in the second debate. A lot of attacks on Christine Elliott by Doug Ford. But and I mean, you could really see that they were the 2 front runners. So. And for some reason, Carolyn Mulroney just didn't seem to get the traction. I think she thought she was going to get a lot better traction, but that's how it works out.
Well, at least for once, the person who reportedly raised the most money did not win. So I guess that's a little bit of precedent. But is there any way that we can talk about this entire leadership contest without discussing why it was necessary in the first place?
Well, no, I don't think so. I think we all know why it was necessary. Actually, you know what? My opinion is I don't think it was necessary. I think Patrick Brown really if he had come out from those accusations, because, we should remind the listeners, what he was accused of wasn't criminal. He wasn't accused of anything criminal. He was accused of being sexually inappropriate. He was accused of making some, to put it lightly, and I think maybe some pieces too lightly, he was really just accused of being a creep on a couple of bad dates. And he should have just apologized. I think had he apologized, had he owned up to it, had he admitted what he'd done and couched it in a way similar to what I just said, he probably would still be the leader today.
Well, yeah, it did begin on January 24th. CTV aired a story. 2 women accused Patrick Brown of sexual misconduct. No police, no anything. It's in the past. And minutes before that report aired, Patrick Brown denied the allegations, said he would stay on as leader in a 70-second long news conference. No questions.
Where he didn't accept any responsibility for his behavior. He denied the allegations. And, I think Janet Ecker put it best. I think I've said this on my show as well. She was interviewed on TVO with Steve Paikin. And she said, look, we've all been on dates that went sideways. We've all been on dates that went a little awry. And, she said herself, she's been on a few dates where, things went a little faster than she had anticipated. And she made her points known, and she ended up ending the date. So similar to what I believe happened with these 2 young women, or the accusers anyway, in the Patrick Brown situation. But I think had Brown apologized for his behavior, had he accepted responsibility, he should have done what Al Franken did in terms of accepting responsibility. I don't think Al Franken should have stepped down, but again, that's my opinion. I think Patrick Brown, had he apologized and admitted it, I think, as I said, I think he'd still be the leader. The other problem, of course, is that once he did that, the party, and particularly MPPs like Lisa MacLeod, who I don't think supported him anyway. She ran against him in the last leadership race. So I don't think she supported him. I think there was enough support within the party, or a lack of support within the party, and enough support to get rid of him. That's ultimately what happened. I think he was undone by his party, not so much by his own actions.
Well, I just think it was a really fatal mix of split-second decisions. Like, the 70-second news conference where he just denied everything and walked out. That's not exactly going to help. And then immediately after that, everybody on his staff resigned. So how does it look? Yeah.
Well, and again, they stated why they resigned. They resigned because he didn't admit it. They said to him, even his chief of staff said, look, just admit it and we can move on. And he's like, no, I'm not going to admit it. It never happened. So, it's a good object lesson for guys out there. I'll tell you that. When you just because you buy someone a drink doesn't necessarily mean you've bought into anything else. And I think that's the big lesson from the Patrick Brown experience for guys out there. Just because you bought a woman a couple of drinks, or maybe you took her back to your apartment for a nightcap. Yeah, it's not exactly a license to behave like a creep.
Hours later, he stepped down as party leader after the caucus indicated it couldn't collectively support his leadership. So Vic Fedeli was named interim leader by caucus the next day. That kind of looks to me like there's our chance. He's out.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there was they saw an opportunity and they jumped on it.
Especially this close to the election.
Well, I think there were possibly some problems. I think there were problems within the caucus in terms of the platform, the People's Guarantee. Yeah. It might have been a little more progressive than they were used to.
Well, whatever did happen, that wasn't the end for the party, though, either, because on January 28th, PCPO President Rick Dykstra resigned after Maclean's published an article in which former federal conservative staffer alleged Mr. Dykstra had sexually assaulted her in 2014 when he was a conservative member of parliament. So, You know,
Right.
2 days later, here's another guy in the same party. Starting to look bad.
Well, and well, the other thing too is that both Dykstra and Brown were in the Harper conservative government at the time, right? So,
Yeah.
and there were rumors on the Hill. There were a lot of rumors on the Hill about the behavior of some of these backbenchers, and so apparently it's come to haunt them.
Well,
It looks good on them, frankly.
Well, of course. Vic Fideli wasted no time in being the new sheriff in town. We're going to clean up the rot. Of course, you know, alluding with every statement like that it's all because of Patrick Brown and his leadership of the party. It just appeared that no matter what happened, he wasn't going to be getting back in. He stayed invisible for a couple weeks. February 6th, he said that the truth will come out. He gave an interview to Post Media on the 9th, calling the accusations absolute lies. He hired Elise Mills to do his PR, which I think that just made it more obvious to people who are already leaning on the "you're playing this the wrong way" card. But it didn't get any easier, and at the same time, they're trying to carry on a credible leadership convention. Brown fights to get back into the race, and he makes these proclamations that I'm going to clear my name and I can win this job back, and that lasted all of 4 days.
Well,
So
yeah, I think
party
they generally just chased him. I think they chased him away. I think they just said, no, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, Patrick. It doesn't matter. You know what? We don't want you. We're done with you.
I agree. But is that going to hurt the party in the long run, or are people going to forget that it was that much of a mess, even just deciding who could run?
Well, it's interesting. That's a really good question, I think, Glenn, because, you know, one of the things that Doug Ford said after he won, and even our local candidate said recently, you know, well, people just don't trust Kathleen Wynne. That's why they're going to win. That's why they're going to defeat the Liberals. People don't trust Kathleen Wynne. But can you trust a progressive conservative party that would toss its leader under the bus over questionable allegations? Can you trust a party that has just elected Doug Ford? I mean, seriously, I asked this question earlier today. Can you really trust Doug Ford more than Kathleen Wynne?
I agree. That is a serious weighing of the evidence, I guess. And in the background, this what appears to be an inside war with Patrick Brown and the party keeps going. February 16th, Vic Fideli boots him out of caucus. So, I mean, when the legislature rose last year, Patrick Brown was sitting directly across from Kathleen Wynne as leader of the opposition in the first bench. When they go back this just recently, Patrick Brown is way up in the corner, one desk by himself. What a change. So it seems like nothing can get any worse. But yeah, it can. Randy Hillier starts making noise about his complaint with the Ontario Integrity Commissioner, calling into Patrick Brown's spending while party leader. Then the Globe and Mail publishes a story about Patrick Brown attempted to make a $375,000 deal with the man who would later be an acclaimed PC candidate in Brampton. This is with all the court cases ongoing about the nomination process in over 10 ridings. Do you think that the allegations, the sexual allegations, were just the straw that broke the camel's back? Do the insiders know that there's real dirt on some of these nominations and the stuff that's actually in the courts, that they got rid of them now?
Well, exactly. You raise a good point, because there are a number of riding elections that are under investigation right now by the OPP, the Ontario Provincial Police. The very same thing they accused the Liberals of, right? This election tampering. Of course, the Liberals beat the rap on this. This was after Sudbury. I think what we saw here was the Progressive Conservative Party looking for any reason to get rid of Patrick Brown. And when these allegations reared their head, I mean, you got to try and figure out what was the motivation for these allegations too. I mean, where did these women suddenly come out? You know, one of them said, "Well, I came out as a result of the Me Too campaign." But you know, what's the ultimate motivation? I think we're going to find out more after the election, perhaps, or as Patrick Brown tries to get some answers. But I mean, he knows it's not a criminal issue. He told the women, well, he challenged them to actually charge them and have the police called. You know, I mean, that's just a waste of time. He's still under investigation. I mean, he's being sued by the premier right now for libel.
Yes.
I think the party was looking for any reason to get. I think the party was looking for any reason to get rid of him. They took the first opportunity they could find. They didn't want to embarrass themselves, so they figured let's find some way of embarrassing him, and then we'll try and move on from there, I think.
You know, if you stop and you think about that, this is a party that was leading by at least 30 points over the Liberals and the NDP in all polling. And they were still so uncomfortable with the things Patrick Brown was doing inside the party that they'd still get rid of him this close to the election with the polling that high.
Well, and I think what they figured was, okay, we got our numbers up to where they're basically nothing we do could damage the numbers. So let's try and see if we can't get rid of them now. And I mean, even the decision to hold the leadership convention, they weren't even sure they were going to do that. They were thinking they might just appoint somebody, but then Fideli said, well, I'm not going to run for the leadership. So
was it his to have? Do you think it was Vic Fideli's to have?
I think he may have thought that. I think he and a couple of other people may have thought that. But, I mean, the reality was that's not what the people wanted.
I see. Oh, okay. Now, you know, like you said, I understand that strategy. Our polling is so good, we can plug somebody else in and ride it out. Well, that's a perfect segue. That's a perfect segue into who these candidates are. And we might as well start at number 4, Tanya Granic Allen, who is a member of that parents group for free education. Their basic whole raison d'etre is to fight the sex education curriculum. We heard that numerous times in her campaign. It was her criticism of sex ed, and about the only other thing she said of note was she was going to tear wind turbines out of the ground. Yeah. That's about it.
Yeah. Well, again, she was a one-issue candidate, let's face it, you know. And frankly, her issue was based on, well, I'm going to say idiocy, okay? And I know that might upset some of the listeners out there. But the reality is, you know, the position of Granic Allen and even Doug Ford the other day on Sunday and on Monday again, he said, look, you know, the sex ed curriculum, parents should be the ones who teach children about these things. It shouldn't be the purview of the educators. But, you know, I did a broadcast on my show a little more than a week ago with some representatives from the Ontario or from our local constabulary, okay? And what they're doing, we just received funding from the province of $40,000 to fight sex trafficking, okay? And so we talked on the broadcast about, okay, well, who's being sex trafficked? And what we find out is it's primarily young children. It's kids between the ages of 7 years old and 14. Those are the primary targets. You know, and so it seems kind of ridiculous for us to say, well, we don't want to teach kids about sex ed or sexuality when these are the prime targets of sexual predators. I mean, isn't it incumbent upon us as a province and as educators to get the information to these kids as soon as possible about sexuality, about how their bodies work, how it's okay to say no? I mean, the primary focus of the earliest parts of the sex ed curriculum, which starts in kindergarten, by the way, listeners, is they teach them about their body. They teach it's okay to say no. You know, abstinence is actually a huge part of the early part of the curriculum. And talking about inappropriate touching and inappropriate behavior from people who you know you may trust or people you've met. I mean, right now predators are targeting these very children, these kids who they hope are uneducated, these kids who they hope are not aware of what is happening out there on social media. And this is who the police are targeting. I mean, the day after we did that interview on my broadcast, they busted a guy from Kingston for doing the very same thing. He was charged with luring online, trying to lure a 13-year-old girl. So, I mean, it's one thing for people to say, well, the province has no purview. Sex ed should be the responsibility of parents. Well, clearly, parents aren't educating them enough. Maybe parents are too concerned about having that conversation. One of the things I said to the police officers is, because kids are getting cell phones younger and younger and younger, maybe when you hand over that cell phone, maybe it's time to have the talk. Maybe that's the time you want to sexually educate your children. But to say that the province is doing it too early and that they're talking, I mean, she said one of her big quotes was, the reason our math scores are so low in this problem is because kids are too focused on anal sex. I mean, what the hell is that? And you want to be the leader of the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario?
Well, I think that was something that just came to my mind. It was a tweet that I'll admit it was one of my own tweets, and I really liked it. But I mean, as anybody who watches my timeline knows, I referred to Tanya Granic Allen as church lady, and I said someone has to tell church lady that running for the leadership of a political party is not the same as running for the leadership of your synod, because that's exactly what it appeared to me to be. She was running to be on the board of elders for her church. And this is politics.
Or the head of the local PTA. Maybe she wanted to be the head of the local PTA. But now they're calling her a kingmaker. They're saying that the majority of her supporters went to Ford, which is probably true. But I mean, one of the things that allowed Doug Ford to win, and I know we'll get to this a little later, is that there were 4 names to check off on the ballot. Weird choices, 1, 2, 3, 4. A lot of people went 1 only. A lot of people went 1, 2 only. Very few people went 1, 2, 3, 4. And as a result of that, that's what allowed Doug Ford to take the numbers.
Yep. Indeed. But regardless, yes, we will get to that. She did have something to say at the end of the day. And when Doug Ford made that one press conference where he subconsciously endorsed a couple of what she was saying, that was enough to get him second place votes. But we'll get to that. Caroline Mulroney. The rumor was that she was going to come in with all this money and all this charisma and blow everything out. But what we saw from Caroline Mulroney in her quote-unquote campaign right from the very start is she went after Doug Ford and Christine Elliott nonstop. So doesn't political science tell you that you attack the people you're behind?
Yeah, obviously, yeah. I don't think she had anything to offer, to be frank with you. I mean, she had money, she had name recognition, but beyond that, I don't think she had anything else to offer. I mean, she talked about how she was going to cancel the carbon tax just like all of the others, and I think the long and short of it was she didn't bring anything to the table. She honestly didn't bring anything to the table. Will she be a good candidate in her riding? Could she be a good member of parliament? Perhaps. But, I mean, beyond that, she's other than the name recognition, I mean, who is Caroline Mulroney, right?
Well, I jumped on that bandwagon pretty fast, too. I said, she's not here for you, but that's from a day gone by. But all she did was attack. She had no policy, no nothing about Doug Ford. She said, Doug can't get the job done. About Christine Elliott, she said, Christine has proven that she won't, whatever that means. Doug Ford was
alluding to. I think Caroline Mulroney was alluding to the fact that she had been a sitting member of provincial parliament. She stepped down to work as the province's patient ombudsman. So she ultimately turned her back on the party by taking a job with the provincial government as the provincial ombudsman. But I mean, when you're an ombudsman, you don't work for the province. You actually work. For the most part, you're working against the province, especially if you're a patient ombudsman. Because patients are complaining about lack of healthcare access or lack of proper treatment. They're blaming the government. Who does the ombudsman represent? They represent the people. So really, from an opposition perspective, being a provincial ombudsperson was probably a good spot for her to be in.
Well, the thing I look at immediately is if she would have been appointed patient ombudsman by a PC government, I bet it wouldn't be an issue.
Oh, probably. They would have just thought it was a cushy appointment.
And it would have been okay because it's us. Now, when when you look at them all, Caroline Mulroney raised nearly $1 million in a 20-day campaign or something?
Yeah, almost a month.
Okay, so that's a little more than Andrew Scheer raised. And his campaign was 8 months. Christine Elliott, a little over $750,000. And Doug Ford claimed just under $500,000. Tanya Granic Allen, somewhere probably around $140,000 by the time it all comes in. So, I mean, Mulroney had the advantage with money, no doubt about it. She had the most generous donors.
Well, I was going to say, so she obviously represented a very specific arm within the Progressive Conservative Party. That would be the more conservative, the corporate conservatives, the money donors. These are the people who are Bay Street conservatives. They have money. She lives in a pretty Tony area district in Toronto. She wants to represent Rosedale. She has a very specific base. And unfortunately for her, I guess, or fortunately for the province of Ontario, there are more people who aren't affluent than there are people who are affluent. Clearly those people felt as though she was going to represent one group of Ontarians being the affluent Ontarians and not them. So she didn't have broader appeal, and she didn't focus on trying to get broader appeal either, in my humble opinion. As you said, she attacked, but she didn't offer anything. She didn't offer herself as an alternative in any kind of real way. The one thing I admired about Trudeau when he ran in the last federal election, and let's face it, he's got some issues too right now, he didn't attack. He focused, when someone said something bad about him, he let that roll off him. He focused on the positive aspects of it. And I don't think any of these candidates did that. So, I think it pretty much gives us a good idea as to what we can expect in the provincial election in June.
Yeah, I would say from these numbers, Caroline Mulroney's core support is definitely in the 416. Her donors gave an average of $326 each. Christine Elliott's average was $160. Doug Ford's average was $95. So
right.
As far
he's
as
definitely more grassroots.
Yes, and as far as endorsements go, Christine Elliott was ahead there, ahead of Caroline Mulroney, and basically nobody supported Doug Ford in caucus. Nobody.
That's right. Even at the federal government level, Christine Elliott had 7 MPs supporting her.
Yes.
None supported Doug Ford. None.
Oh, boy.
So it's good. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Because, for Christine Elliott, this was her third attempt, I think, at leadership. I think one of the most glaring statements that I gleaned, or one of the most glaring observations I gleaned from this, was that if you are a woman in the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario, you will never be the leader. It's unfortunate, but we've seen this time and time and time again. This isn't the first time. In the last leadership convention, or last leadership race, had Lisa MacLeod, Christine Elliott, and one other woman, I believe, running. Patrick Brown won that. And every time a woman has run, she's either fared second or a close second, almost third. But they never, always a bridesmaid, never a bride when it comes to the leadership of the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario. Now, I don't know if that's the same nationally, but I know in the province of Ontario, that seems to be it. And maybe some people are going to say, oh, now you're throwing up the sexism card. Look, the reality is she was a far superior candidate, in my humble opinion, than Doug Ford. I think Christine Elliott, she had the background. She has the knowledge. She understands the electorate in this province. And I think, honestly, that the Progressive Conservatives really, to use a phrase my dad liked to use, shit the bed when it came to choosing who they chose.
Well, I have to agree with that because, me, all the way out here in Alberta, I thought Christine Elliott was the logical choice because she knows how the Ontario government works. Doug Ford doesn't have a clue how the government works, and apparently it doesn't matter if you listen to it. So,
never let logic get in the way of hyperbole, rhetoric, and feelings. Right?
But
this is the same party that says, people are feeling, left behind. People are feeling that, I mean, even you look at the issues they bring up. They bring up the cost of hydro. In the last 8 months, the cost of hydro has dropped dramatically in this province. People are seeing 25% cuts to their hydro. They say, people are being left behind. I mean, I had a conversation with a guy on Twitter today. I was talking about the OHIP Plus that this current government just brought in, or actually brought in a little bit ago. And I mean, we've got working people in this province who are 24 and under, young kids coming out of college and university, getting their first job. They now have access to medical prescriptions. We have young families, people who are just starting out, who are struggling to make ends meet because they have, 1, 2, 3 or more children. They have to pay for prescription drugs. Well, now they don't in Ontario. And I had a guy say to me, well, what about, the province is spending money where they don't need to. What about the people who have benefit and their benefit programs? They're covered. Well, that doesn't affect the OHIP Plus.
Yeah.
The insurance companies are still going to cover the people that are covered. It's primarily for people who don't have coverage. And so, again, we have a provincial government that saw a need and that tried to fix the need, and they get slapped down for it. When they talk about not being able to trust Kathleen Wynne, I don't know what it is about Kathleen Wynne. You and I talked about this before. What is it people don't like about Kathleen Wynne? It's the same thing that Doug Ford's saying. I mean, they're bringing up issues from, to an election or two ago, issues that have been resolved. So really, what is the issue? Well, it's a trust issue. I don't trust. Well, what is it you don't trust about her? Is it because she doesn't have a penis? Is that what it is? I mean, can we look at the Conservatives? They had 3 women running against one guy. Who won? The penis.
Yeah. And he's real trustworthy, I've heard.
Yeah, and let's face it, and when it comes to penises, he's a real dick.
Well, there's lots to talk about as far as Doug Ford goes. But before we talk about the history of Doug Ford, I just want to keep it on this little topic we're going. And of course, every time somebody wins a leadership, more and more, every time, more groups come out of the woodwork to claim credit for getting that person the victory. Well, it's certainly happened with Doug Ford. I think maybe some of the people who are coming out that are saying what great work they did to help him may not pay off so great in the long term. I'm looking at something from Press Progress. Pastors who preached homophobe sermons and anti-Semitic views endorsed Doug Ford for Ontario PC leader. Well, isn't that wonderful? Right. The infamous Charles McVitie and Paul Melnichuk. Now, anybody who knows about the fight against homophobia, Islamophobia, that sort of thing, you know who these two guys are. That's so right. Does that help or hurt them coming out and claiming some credit for making Doug Ford the leader?
Well, I think it could help them. I mean, obviously, their parishioners are going to support Doug. Right? I mean, don't forget. I mean, we're talking again. This goes to the reason why don't people like Kathleen Wynne? Well, she is a lesbian. She's an openly gay premier. I mean, this Doug Ford's probably just a dream come true to these guys.
Well, but what about everybody else? I mean, this is the issue that we mentioned slightly when I was on your show yesterday, and people coming to me out here and saying, "Oh my God, Ontario basically elects the federal government. Now Doug Ford, oh my God." Well, let's keep it in perspective. There's maybe 40,000 votes went for Doug Ford in a province of 13.6 million people. For me to use another internet parlance, calm your tits. Like, relax. Yeah. It doesn't,
That's right.
But that's the message.
And you know what? I think we talked about this on my show when I had you on here. Was it Tuesday, I think, or on Monday when I had you on? I mean, we talked about the fact that who joins political parties in this country? I mean, I think it's less than 12% have belonged to all political parties. So the Liberals, Progressive Conservatives, the NDP, the Bloc, the Greens, they have, in terms of total population, about 12% of people are card-carrying members of a party. They talked about how, we've got our party membership up. We're now at almost 200,000 members. Well, as you said, we've got 13+ million people in this province. 200,000, what is that?
It's not a whole lot. It's a good weekend for the Jays. That's all it is.
Yeah, exactly. So, should we be as shocked as a nation? I don't think so. I think we're talking about a political party. You had to be a member to vote. You had to pay your $10 or whatever it was. Only 200,000 people, and then they had how many votes in total? I think. I thought I read somewhere they said they only had 68,000 or something.
Well, the numbers I saw were higher than that, but if that's what it was, that's pretty sad.
Okay.
There's no doubt about it. Yeah. Now
I'm not sure.
Yeah, the other group that claimed some credit were, of course, anti-choice groups, so-called pro-lifers, and as the analytics proved, when the votes were allowed to be looked at, I believe it was something like 80% of Tanya Granic Allen, the ballots that had her number 1, had Doug Ford number 2. And Caroline Mulroney's numbers didn't quite swing that far either way. So, in effect, this talk about Granic Allen being a kingmaker does have some merit to it.
Yes, again, but this goes to the 1, 2, 3, 4 on the ballot, and how many people actually voted all the way down.
True enough, and there just wasn't enough of a switch. But I mean, so we have the homophobes, the anti-Semites, and the anti-choicers all being pleased with Doug Ford becoming leader.
Mm-hmm. Well,
beware, Ontario. Beware, Ontario. Beware. Now, do you want to talk about?
So I just looked here. According to the Progressive Conservative Party, there is 190,000 members to the party. Now, I don't know if all of those people voted, but they have 190,000 people in a province of 13 million and change.
Okay, I guess that's supposed to be some sort of indication of majority or something. I have no idea.
Well, I think the point I'm trying to make here, I mean, is we tend to elect governments with 39% of the vote. Let's face it, the people who, there's no 50%. It's very rare, but usually if you get 39%, it's generally the majority because there's so many people on a ballot, right? So many choices in a provincial election, and it's not a ranked balloting system. So what we see here then is that with those people as their base, if you will, it's less than 200,000 people. I mean, is that significant enough to swing the majority of Ontarians towards the Progressive Conservatives? I don't think it is. But again, this is going to be a strange and a wild race in June. I know that.
Now, if we're going to talk about Doug Ford's history, where do you start? I mean, I remember some of the stuff that he was doing when he was campaign manager for Rob Ford for the Toronto mayorship. He pulled some pretty good boners then. He accused a Etobicoke home for teenagers with autism. He said that home had ruined the community and suggested with no evidence that the teenagers there are criminals. The father of one of those boys, Tommy Lenathan, asked for an apology, and Ford told the Toronto Sun that the father can go to hell. I don't even care.
That's right.
And he threw in the tidbit, it's a full-out jihad against us right now. Wow.
A jihad against us. And again, this is from a guy who doesn't know what the word jihad means. Right?
Well, I mean,
clearly he has no idea what the word jihad means.
Well, I guess he's hoping everybody that hears it doesn't either.
Well, and this is, I think, a lot of problem that we have, especially when you've got your. I got called out on Twitter the other day for referring to someone as a Christian extremist, and they're like, "Oh, what's a Christian extremist? You're talking about the Templar Knights?" And I'm like, "No, jeez, oh man, it's crazy." I mean, because intolerance to the extreme, that's extremism. It's okay. I suppose you don't have to be in favor of every single thing, but, when you're promoting violence and you're advocating violence and all kinds of other things against one group or another or one sect over another, personally, I find that to be extremist, and I don't find it acceptable. That's just me, I guess. But the literal meaning of jihad, okay, is a struggle. The jihad is a struggle or an effort, and it means much more than a holy war. Because most of the time when Muslims talk about jihad, and I'm sorry to go off on this tangent, but I just want the listeners to hear this. When they talk about the jihad and the struggle of jihad, it's a personal struggle. It's an internal struggle. It's an internal struggle to understand yourself and your role within your faith, your role within society. It's not about waging a holy war. That's not what a jihad is. And Muslims will tell you that. And anyone who understands the definition of them, it's a struggle. It's a fight. But it's primarily an internal struggle and fight. It's the same thing Christians go through when they give their heart to Jesus, right? And you have to live your life according to the life of Jesus. And sometimes people make mistakes in that. And so they look for atonement. But it's always this internal struggle. And that's really what jihad is. It is a personal struggle. It's not a waging of a war. I mean, it's been bastardized, certainly, by extremists.
Yes. Well, I mean.
So I mean, for Doug Ford to say they're waging a jihad against us, I mean, clearly he has no idea what the word means.
Well, again, Doug Ford from the Harold Ballard School of Public Relations.
That's right. Yeah.
Let her rip.
And I mean, he was a big guy in his community, right? I mean, he was a big wheel in his neighborhood. He was I don't know if he was a popular guy, but from all accounts, he was either popular or people were afraid of him, one or the other. But I mean, it's like Michael Corleone used to say, right? What do you want? Right. People to love you or people to be afraid of you? I'd rather have people afraid of me. And I think that's the Harold Ballard, Doug Ford school of politics. Really, you have people they should be worried about what my next move is going to be.
Oh, I think there's enough people worried about that now, on his side and on other sides. So we'll see how he handles it. But the Ford family.
But the progressive conservatives are still in lead in this province, unfortunately, though.
For now. I mean.
Exactly.
Now, the Ford family history is not news. It's been out there for like 5 years, most of it. That doesn't even include everything that Rob did.
Or their father when he was a member of Harris's government.
That's true. But I mean, way back in 2013, the Globe and Mail put a lot of time and effort into a serious report on the Ford family, and what they found has never officially been refuted by the Fords. They just bitch and don't talk about it, but Doug Ford sold hashish for several years in the 1980s. Another Ford brother, Randy, was also involved in the drug trade and was once charged in relation to a drug-related kidnapping. And the Ford sister, Kathy, has been the victim of drug-related gun violence.
Oh, and apparently was also a hanger-on with Anton Drug and his white supremacists. She wasn't necessarily a white supremacist herself, but she was definitely a hanger-on. She liked to hang out with those people, because that's what, people do.
It seems that there's lot of...
This is the crazy part about this, Glenn, and we're laughing here, but this is all true. There have been countless people interviewed by the Toronto Star, by the Globe and Mail, by other media outlets that talk about Mr. Ford in high school, and everyone says, "Oh, this was in high school. This was in high school." This was a guy moving pounds of hash. It wasn't some guy who sold you a dime bag now and then. This guy was moving weight.
Yes.
Okay, and I mean, he's supposed to be a law and order guy. He's supposed to be a real good friend of the cops. And now, granted, marijuana is probably going to be legal in the next year or so, but that doesn't change the fact that this guy was in high school. He was selling drugs to kids. selling drugs to kids. And today, in the last couple of days, he's been advocating selling drugs selling marijuana, rather, cannabis, in corner stores and things like that. So, I mean, I don't know. Sure, it was high school, but obviously those things stick with you, right?
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. Now, Kathy Ford, in January 2012, her longtime boyfriend, who is a convicted cocaine and hash dealer named Scott McIntyre, was charged with threatening to murder the mayor at his Etobicoke home. He eventually pleaded guilty to a lesser offense and was given credit for time served. Doug Ford interviewed with the CBC and said, "To be honest with you, I really don't know Scott McIntyre. Photographs and video taken on the night of the 2010 election show that Mr. McIntyre was part of the small group of family members celebrating with the new mayor, his wife, and Doug."
Yeah, so you invite people you don't actually know to party with you, right?
In the small circle after you win the election. Those are people you don't know. Okay.
That's right.
Nothing different there. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff to be dragged through the news cycle again as we get closer to Election Day. Who's going to, in your opinion, who's going to be the ones to bring it out first? Or will it be one of the papers, not the parties?
I think it's going to be the media. I think the media is just waiting for an opportunity, frankly. I mean, we're already seeing inklings of it with some of the Andrew Coyne articles of late. We're seeing some stuff there. We're seeing it in other publications. We're already seeing people trying to defend it, especially on social media. Oh, it was just high school. He was in high school. Yeah, oh, come on, he was in high school. It should be pointed out that he was supplying kids in high school because after high school he was still moving pounds. This didn't just happen while he was in high school. It was while he was after high school as well, right? I mean, into his early adulthood, if you will. And again, these are all allegations. None of this has been proven in court. So it's all hearsay based on the testimony of people who, for the most part, were too afraid to have their names listed. So what are they afraid of?
Yeah, it doesn't quite add up. There's no doubt about that. No doubt about that. So, I mean, considering Kathleen Wynne, considering Andrea Horwath, Doug Ford has by far, would you agree, the most dirty laundry in this election?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, because, again, Kathleen Wynne's been around a while. If she had dirty laundry to air, it would have already come out. Same thing with Andrea Horwath. I mean, the reality is both of these women have been around long enough that if there was anything nasty or untoward to be discovered, we'd have already heard about it. The saddest thing about Doug Ford is even before he was a candidate for anything, we were hearing about it. So if this is just the tip, if this is the tip of the iceberg, like what else is out there then? I mean, we already know about these things. We've known about these things since the 2013 or so. Right? So what do we not know? What else is out there? You know,
could be interesting.
Well, another point I'd like to make about Mr. Ford is that he likes to talk about being a job creator. He talked about that when his brother was running for mayor. Oh, we know how to create jobs. We're going to create lots of jobs. When you look at his company, the bulk of his employees are in the United States. All right. Sure, they know how to create jobs. They know how to create jobs in Chicago. They don't appear to know how to create jobs in Etobicoke because they've had the same very small staff there. I think they primarily do admin work in Ontario now. Again, I'm not expert on deco labels, but I'm just saying what I know based on the information that's available publicly. It's the smaller operation in Canada tends to be the head office operation, but the bulk of the work's being done in the United States. So when you talk about being a job creator, I mean, I'm sure Donald Trump's happy you're a job creator, and the governor of Illinois is happy you're a job creator, but people of Ontario haven't actually benefited a whole hell of a lot.
Seems to be a pattern in our political circles. I mean, the name Paul Martin comes to mind when you mention things like that. And Chrétien. Interesting. The first.
Yeah, I'd like to see a job creator actually create jobs in this country, frankly.
It's a novel idea. I'm sure they'll consider it and they'll take it to the floor. The first leadership debate in Toronto was on February 16th. There were some issues, and of course, one of them was the tension over Patrick Brown, because, everybody thought over the last little flurry before that he would be there, but he wasn't. But he was the subject of several questions. The candidates were asked whether or not they would allow Brown to run for their party. Christine Elliott, Caroline Mulroney said they would allow it if the allegations are proven false.
Right.
Of course, Doug Ford, reminding me of somebody else who's in office in the United States, said he wants to get the facts and sit down with Brown before making a decision. I'm not going to litigate this in front of the media. And of course, Church Lady was just shocked that anybody would even consider letting him back in. So, I guess all to be expected. It seemed like just about everybody was in favor of marijuana retail being private.
That's right. Well, they want to privatize the LCBO too, right?
Yes,
let's face it, the progressive conservatives, they said they wanted to do that for a while. Although even under Mike Harris, when they had the opportunity the last time, they talked a good game, but they never did it. It reminds me a lot of the federal regime that we just kicked out of office here in Canada. I mean, the reality is they talk a big game on pipelines, they talked a big game on trade, but we didn't really see them moving the goalposts. We didn't see them build a single refinery during the entire time they were in office. Not one pipeline was built while the entire time they were in office, and yet they accused the current government of standing in the way. I mean, who stood in the way? Who was standing in the way of Mr. Omnibus legislation? Nobody stood in Mr. Omnibus's way. He did whatever the hell he wanted to. So clearly he didn't want to do pipelines.
Well, that's just interpretation, I think, is the friendly way to speak about that. But I found it interesting when asked about marijuana, Doug Ford called it an emerging market. And he doesn't like the government getting involved. An emerging market from Doug Ford.
Well, and I mean, he knows it's anything but emerging, clearly, from having been in the market. So, I mean, Jody Emery said the same thing when I had her on my show a while ago. She said, they call it an emerging market, but people have been doing this for thousands of years. From the moment it became illegal because someone decided to pencil it in and add it to the controlled substances list till today. The market has always been there. That's like saying the booze market didn't exist prior to the removal of prohibition. I mean, give me a break.
Well,
right up until right up until the early part of the last century, you could buy cannabis, beverages. You could buy cannabis at the tobacconist. I mean, it was available everywhere. So, now it's not because parents are worried, apparently.
Well, Tanya Granic Allen, this seemed like bizarro world to me. She made the claim that she doesn't have the same baggage as the other candidates. I guess
True.
It depends on your def. Well, for someone
it's
who
probably true.
She's got a public face to basically give parents the right on what school curriculum is, that's baggage.
Well, I think that's more opinion and op-ed than baggage. I think she wants everyone to get on board her crazy train. But, I mean, it's the same thing what Doug Ford said. They rammed this education program down the parents' throat. They didn't consult with anyone. I mean, they spent almost 3 years doing consultations. They met with parent associations. They met with boards of education. They met with psychiatrists. They met with, they met with just a litany of people. And I mean, all that information is available online and to the public, so that we actually know who they met with, because it's all on public record. But you have the opposition saying that they just rammed it through and nobody paid attention. I mean, I go to the occasional public meeting in our town, okay, because they hold them now and then. If there's a budget consultation meeting or all these other, if they're going to do something to expand the town, put in new traffic lights, they have a public consultation. Nobody goes to these things. Nobody. So, whose fault is that? When they have a consultation and nobody shows up, does that mean you have the right to say I wasn't consulted? You had an opportunity. Tanya Granic Allen had the same opportunity as thousands of other parents to get involved in the conversation. She chose not to, and she chose to not get involved and then say nobody consulted me. They didn't go to your house and have a meeting in your living room, Tanya, but you were invited to consultations.
And yet the latest polling I have seen on what the government has brought in, it's right around 50% say they have no problem with it, and it's around 30% that say they have a real problem with it. So in this day and age, that's a majority.
Yeah. Well, and don't forget, you look at that number, that's 30%. I mean, that's who votes Conservative.
The one other thing that Granic Allen chose to speak up about, which again, in my opinion, just labeled her from her pigeonhole, she attacked Christine Elliott for supporting Bill 77. And what Bill 77 is, it bans health professionals from providing any treatment aimed at changing a youth's sexual orientation or gender identity. And basically it targets conversion therapy.
Right.
And this is the same concept that Jason Kenney's brother got shut down in BC for, and he's now open in Ontario. There's not a lot of people are really aware of what conversion therapy is, but basically it's Jesus getting the gay out of you, right?
That's right. We're going to pray the gay away. Let's pray the gay away. I know some people locally that went to conversion camp as youth, and I know one couple actually locally that went to conversion therapy. They met at the camp. They're both still gay. They're just married. And they have, extramarital things, which each of them turn a blind eye to because, So it's, I don't know. It really seems, it definitely smacks of hypocrisy, in my humble opinion. God made us all in his image. Perhaps God's gender fluid.
Well, the thing that amazes me that the opposition party of the largest province in Canada has a candidate for the leadership that is anti-choice, anti-LGBTQ, anti-green energy, anti-carbon tax.
Yep. Anti-sex ed.
Yeah, just completely anti. I guess
I found it hard for me to even online. I can't figure out what Tanya Granic Allen actually supports. We know what she doesn't like, but we sure as hell don't know what she supports.
Well, she can't come out and say it because then there's no way back from that. Maybe that's
the problem when you. Well, and maybe that's what we're looking at with this upcoming provincial election from this progressive conservative party. We're hearing a lot about what they don't support. We hear a lot about what they don't want. We don't hear a hell of a lot about what they do want. They keep talking about waste in government. We're going to root out the race. I mean, I remember when Rob Ford said that, stopping the gravy train in Toronto. We're going to stop the gravy train. He never did anything except privatize garbage pickup. And that led to huge problems for people in the city. They're still complaining about the garbage pickup, the lack of service. But, I mean, when you take those kinds of services away, people notice immediately, right? But as far as the gravy train is concerned, I don't think he ever found a dime.
But it sounded good.
Well, sure, yeah. It's good enough to get elected. I mean, I think part of the problem in this country, and I don't think it's just Ontario, I think it's this whole country, we don't tend to vote for governments. We vote against governments. We tend to throw the bums out. That's what we tend to do in this country. Throw the bums out. We don't get behind a party or a platform. I mean, in my riding, we got a really great member of provincial parliament where I live. We got a good member of parliament federally too, but our MPP provincially will bend over backwards to help people out. We have brought more money to this riding, expanded funding for our hospital, expanded funding for our family health teams and our LINs, which a lot of people don't understand what a LIN is, but we've expanded the funding for that. They've expanded funding. And, we have OHIP Plus now, but prior to OHIP Plus, there was something called the Trillium Drug Program. And what the Trillium Drug Program did was that if you couldn't afford your pharmaceuticals, you could apply for funding through the Trillium Drug Program at any age, and they would cover you. So, I mean, we have a member of provincial parliament, and I think that's what's going to be the real thing in this provincial election. It's going to be the ground game. It's going to be whether your member of provincial parliament is somebody you can vote for, if that person will be reelected. If the person you've got running in your riding is a dickhead, then they're going to be defeated. So it'll be interesting to see if we take more seats. And it comes down to the candidates.
Which is rare these days.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, the polling right before, there's been an awful lot said about polling, and they're inaccurate, they're faulty, they're this, they're that, Okito Magi and Main Street come up for all the heat he took for Calgary last year and the BC election to a certain degree. But most of the polling that came out before voting started were very, very close to what we ended up with. The only thing they got wrong is that sliver to decide it went to Doug Ford, not Christine Elliott. But all the polling all the polling said, look out. Doug Ford very well could win this. I don't know how much credibility it got, but it did come true this time. The pollers got it right.
They did. They didn't necessarily nail who was going to be there was either Christine or Doug, but they said the variance was going to be based on X numbers, and even those numbers were pretty much accurate. So, but I mean, here's the thing, and people are already talking about this, how Christine Elliott got Hillary Clinton, right? I mean, she got the most votes. The most votes, but he won the most ridings.
Yep.
So, I mean, the reality is she totally got Hillary Clinton. My wife created the hashtag Pence Pity Party. Yes. Maybe her and Hillary and Carolyn can get together and have some sherry and talk about how if you don't have a penis, you don't have a chance.
Well, the first thing that came up when they were counting and when Christine Elliott refused to concede the issue of 1,300 votes from a Hamilton riding being counted for Chatham-Kent, I believe. I mean, in a race this close, how could you not go through that? But then the next day, apparently, everything was clear. But the voting process itself was a disaster from a PR standpoint. The online voting system opened at 9 a.m. on Friday, March 2nd, I believe, and remained open until the evening of March 8th. Well, even on March 2nd already, it was in the press. This is Mike Crowley. Says many members have yet to receive a key document that they require to vote. PC members must have their eligibility verified online. The process involves uploading identification and submitting a code sent from the party by mail. It's to ensure the result is not torqued by fraudulently purchased memberships. Well, already as voting started, the campaigns were complaining that there were problems. Press Secretary Ford. Go ahead.
Well, one of the things Ford said, I hate to jump in there, but one of the things that Ford said was if you paid by prepaid credit card, you should not have a membership because prepaid credit cards can't be trusted. So already he was talking about discounting some votes, and this was a day into the voting. Well, if you got your membership by prepaid credit card, there's no way of really tracking that, so you should not have a membership. I mean, they were talking about purging members even before that. But again, it's just like what Trump did in 2015 when he was running for the nomination for the Republicans, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, he really did take a page out of that playbook, I got to say. According to the most recent poll. Oh, sorry, I'm not looking at the most recent poll. Go ahead, sorry.
The Ford campaign press secretary, Lindsey Vanstone, said, "We have thousands of voicemails and thousands of emails from people who are complaining that they haven't received their codes. We can't keep up." The Mulroney campaign said, "We are very concerned about the ability of all members to vote in this election. Right now, we do not have firm numbers, but anecdotally, we know verification levels are low." The Christine Elliott campaign said, "Many of her supporters have not received their codes and are getting frustrated waiting." Well, that was just the first problem. As the days went on, March 6th, everybody was still scrambling. Everybody was still blaming the party for not getting their stuff out quick enough. But everybody was still on the ground, trying to scare up votes without really knowing if these people would be able to vote or not. But I imagine a lot of the ground game was with people specifically helping people get registered. It only makes sense, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
getting their $10 is one thing, but if you can't get them to submit the ballot for you, it doesn't help the end goal. Now, on March 7th, the party again extended the deadline for members to sign up to vote. Registration was supposed to end on March 2nd. Then it was March 5th, and then March 7th. And then hours before that deadline, it was extended again to Thursday, March 8th at 8 p.m. And that was with only a day left to vote. I mean, voting was going on while they were extending registration times. So this is obviously a very poorly executed registration system. Now, there is one picture in the slideshow on the show page, and it was national news about all the campaigns complaining that the party dropped the ball. The party is not getting out these codes so people can vote. This isn't fair. Doug Ford at one point said he wanted it delayed by a week, but the party gave all four leadership campaigns the ability to send the codes from their mailing lists to all of their pledged memberships. All four campaigns declined. And then all four campaigns went public and said the party is screwing everybody.
Right.
I've got here in my hand a little sample from the campaign chairman, and it says, "Nearly a week ago, I presented to your campaigns various additional options to address the concerns about some members not receive their voter ID. I am personally disappointed to see any campaign publicly calling for a delay based on mail failures when you all individually and collectively asked us to not take the specific actions that would have remedied the issue and enfranchised any impacted members." So basically the party just said, look, you guys, quit going into public and saying the party executive screwed up the vote. You know it's a lie. Cut it out. Kind of a internal party structure are these people operating under when this goes on? Have you seen this anywhere where all four leadership campaigns denounce the party and it's a lie?
No. No, I've never seen that. And again, you know, this just tells you really it's a pretty stark example of just how much disarray the party currently is. I mean, they can project unity all they want, but the reality is, I mean, not even their own leadership candidates believe that. So they don't appear to know. Again, this is part of the problem when you change the rules while you're in the middle of the game, right?
Well, it's just unbelievable. But it went through, first ballot, Tanya Granic Allen was dropped. Second ballot, Caroline Mulroney was dropped. And we got a result. Although all four campaigns refused to help get voters the ability to cast their vote, I guess that was a calculated gamble in some manner in their part. But when you look at what actually happened, which is another picture in the slideshow, an overwhelming majority of Tanya Granic Allen's votes went to Doug Ford. Very small amount went to Christine Elliott and Caroline Mulroney. And when Caroline Mulroney left, most of her votes went to Elliott, but enough of her votes went to Ford to give her the points, or to give Doug Ford the points calculation that won this for him. Now, I've seen reports that say if there were 131 votes in different ridings, Christine Elliott would have won. I mean, this is so ridiculously close, and you can talk about the incomplete ballots by some people. You can talk about political tactics, like Ford giving a bit of an acknowledgement to Granic Allen. You have pro-life groups and religious groups telling everybody that Doug Ford's number 2 on the ballot. What's the problem? Is the problem that, okay, they've got 100 and what you said, 80,000 or so members? Where are all the people voting? Is it all because of this email and snail mail thing? Is that their excuse that their turnout is so low?
Well, I think you're going to see them try and use that as an excuse. Absolutely. You're also going to see them say that, due to technical issues where people didn't. I mean, Doug Ford claimed his mother didn't get her PIN number. Right? Doug Ford said his mom couldn't vote because she didn't receive her second. That's the other thing too that sort of raised my ire, because they sent one form. It had your PIN number on it and it had your membership ID. It was on one form. They didn't send 2 cards. They sent one. So for Doug Ford to say, well, my mom didn't receive it, but did she get her membership? Did she get her card? Yeah, she got that, but no, well, then you're lying. Right? Well, I mean, the reality is this is what I was told. This is what I was told by PC members. This is what my candidate told me as well. You got one. There was a card. They didn't spend the money to send out 2 cards. They sent one. If maybe your mom didn't read the card properly. I don't know, but it would have been there if she'd received it.
Well, I find it interesting. But she didn't get her. Well, I find it interesting that Doug Ford, a guy who wants to run Ontario for Ontarians, for his example of there being a problem with voting codes, doesn't say the members of the party. He says my mom.
Yeah.
Because I guess she's more important than everybody else. This is like Elvis and his mom. Yeah,
that's right. It's just like Elvis and his mom. And I mean, let's face it, he hasn't lived in her basement for a long time. So it does beg the question, doesn't it? Is he just making it up?
Do you think that this voting system, this ranked ballot, we've seen the federal Conservatives, we've seen the BC Liberals, we've seen now the Progressive Conservatives of Ontario. Do you think we're going to see more of this, or are party executives going to take another look at the way they're doing things here?
I don't understand your question. Are we going to see more of what?
Are we going to see more votes like this, where it's very specific issues that decide a wide-ranging campaign? If the voting stays like this,
I think we are. I think what's happening is they're trying to hit too broad an audience. That's what's happening. They're trying to. It's the lack of focus that drives people away. People don't understand what you stand for if you stand for a million things. You know, I mean, how can you be focused on a million things? Are there specific issues that you're going to bring to the table? Are there specific issues that are going to be resolved? And are those specific issues the ones that resonate with the electorate? If there's too many issues, the electorate's going to just walk away. It's like having too much choice at the sandwich bar, right? I mean, you know, there's just too much. It's, you know, oftentimes, screw it, I'm going to go get a taco.
Well, I think the other issue with that as well is too many of these people don't stand for anything. They stand against a lot.
That's
they
right.
Don't stand for much.
Well, and I think that's one, because again, even though they have this giant membership list that they talked about, the number of people that actually went out to vote, you know, because that's what I asked my candidate, right? What do you stand for? Why am I voting for you? Well, you're voting for me because I'm not a lying liberal, or I'm not going to do. No. Don't tell me what the other guy did. Okay, I know what the other guy's done. I can read a newspaper. What are you going to do? What are you bringing to the table? You're the candidate. You're the guy who's asking me for my vote. What am I getting in return? Well, I'm not this. No. I want to know what you are, not what you aren't. I mean, in my estimation, that's why Hillary Clinton lost. Hillary Clinton Donald Trump didn't beat Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton beat Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton ran on no policies. She had virtually no platform, except she wasn't Donald Trump. She ran on the notion of status quo, but she wasn't bringing anything to the table. None of these candidates, Doug Ford, Christine Elliott, Carolyn Mulroney, or even Granic Allen, they were bringing nothing to the table. All they wanted to do was burn the house down. Well, why would anybody vote for that? I mean, unless you're an arsonist, what are you voting for?
Ideology.
Well, yeah, but ideology doesn't feed your kids, right? Ideology won't keep your heat on.
Well, that's true, but that seems to be a hanging question for quite a few people who say they are politically involved. Now,
well, this is what they talk about as identity politics, right? I mean, a good example of this would be Lauren Southern, who was barred from entering the UK because she was an extremist. She was a far right activist. She promotes hatred. She doesn't bring anything to the table. She talks about burning the table down. You know, no wonder they didn't let her in the UK, right? I mean, why would you invite her to? It's the same reason we've barred speakers from speaking in Canada. We've had members of serious, if you want to call them fringe groups from the UK, want to come over here and speak, right? And they've been denied entry to the country. They're not allowed to. Why? Because they promote hatred. We've got enough people in this country promoting hate. We don't need someone else. And the UK's in the same boat. I mean, you've got Lauren Southern saying, oh, you know, they banned me because they didn't like what I had to say. Yeah, that's right. Yep, you nailed it. We've got enough people speaking hate here.
Well, that's just it. I think, and what do you expect them to do? That's their job, you know? But now, whatever happens, that goes to the point of the Doug Ford thing, right? I mean, Doug Ford is not bringing anything to the table. He isn't. He's not offering anything. I mean, right now they're in the process of rewriting their platform. They had the People's Guarantee. Obviously, he wasn't happy with it. I guess the party wasn't happy with it either. Maybe that's one of the reasons why they got rid of Patrick Brown, because they didn't appreciate the People's Guarantee. But, I mean, at least he was bringing something to the table. He was giving something for people to vote for. And that's what I like to see, something to vote for. Is it something I'm going to vote for? Not necessarily, but it's something that people can look to, right? Yep. I mean, even Kathleen Wynne right now. Kathleen Wynne's not running around going, oh, phew, you dodged a bullet, I'm not Doug Ford. You know, she's actually campaigning on what she's done provincially. Some people don't like what she's done, but she's got a record. She's not shying away from it. And she's bringing new things to the table. She's giving people something to vote for. You know, same thing with Alberta. I mean, Rachel Notley gave people something to vote for, right? Jason Kenney's running around trying to burn the house down, but he's not offering anything. He's not saying what he's going to do. He's saying what he doesn't want to do, what he's against. What is Jason Kenney actually for? Does anyone know? Jason Kenney.
Yeah. You know, I mean, he might as well be Doug Ford. Christ, they had the guy as their keynote speaker last weekend at the Progressive Conservative Ontario Convention. Yeah. I asked my candidate that. Well, why did you have him? Well, you know, because he united the Conservatives in Alberta. I'm looking at what's happening in Alberta thinking, I don't think he's united the Conservatives in Alberta. I really don't think he has.
Well, the real story is because he wanted to fundraise there. That's why. You know, that's
exactly.
The only reason he's there. He's part of the club. Come get some money.
That's right.
Well,
we're not going to fly it out to you. You better come here and get it yourself.
That's right. You got to shake my hand if you want my money. We're never probably going to know what happened in the meetings on Sunday. But by the end of it, Doug Ford was the leader. Christine Elliott didn't come flat out and say we're good. But I think this is an issue that for this to be pursued with this much time to the election, with all the dirty laundry that would get a lot more scrutiny than it did the first time it flew by, they don't need that. That's a disaster. So,
well, and
you think there is,
and to that point, with regards to dirty laundry, don't forget when all that stuff was coming out before, he wasn't running in a position of any influence. He was running for a council seat, and he was his brother's wingman. Those aren't important things. Now you want to be the premier of the province of Ontario. Guess what? Now that stuff, that dirty laundry, now that stuff's it's gonna be like a dirty laundry bag found under a bed after you moved out of your apartment 8 months ago. There's going to be some ripeness to it.
Well, again, I guess it'll depend. Do you think we're going to see the new fallback? Do you think Doug Ford's first tactic will be fake news, agenda, can't be trusted? Is that going to be his first response?
Well, he's already essentially using that. I mean, look at the way he's responded to his treatment on the CBC over the weekend.
Okay.
On Monday, his first interview with CBC in Ottawa there. He didn't like the way the questions were going there. He didn't like the fact that they were focusing on this issue. You know, I mean, he basically was already calling it fake news. So, you know, we can wait for it to happen, but I think it's already started.
Okay. Do you think there was some sort of deal made with Christine Elliott for her to drop this?
No, I think Christine Elliott came to the conclusion that the only way it was going to be changed is if she took him to court, and that wasn't going to win them an election in June.
So she actually did what was...
She sucked it up for the party.
Yeah, okay. So she actually did what was best for the party, despite Carolyn Mulroney campaigning that she had abandoned the party.
That's right. I mean, say what you will about, you know what, you can, Carolyn Mulroney really owes Christine Elliott an apology for saying that. Because the reality is, you know, and again, I'm not a conservative for the listeners out there. You could probably tell that from the conversation. But I think Christine Elliott is a long-standing conservative. Her husband was Jim Flaherty, for crying out loud. He was the finance minister under Mike Harris. You know, they created the Ontario that Kathleen Wynne and the McGuinty government inherited, okay? She knows what it's like to be a member of a political party in government. Yeah. So she also knows how to stand with her party. So she wasn't about to sink the party ship over the fact that she lost this nomination. She cares about the party. She wouldn't have run if she didn't care about the party.
I agree. She had a safe gig. Yeah,
well, exactly. And let's face it, she was the most. If you want to look at who was the adult in the room, it was clearly Christine Elliott.
Yeah, that does seem pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Do you think that if Ford does not win the election, it's only a matter of time before he's gone?
Hey, he's not sticking around. He's not sticking around if he doesn't win. No way. He's going to run for the mayor of Toronto.
Oh, boy.
That election's in November. Oh, yeah. If he doesn't win the premiership, he's running against John Tory for the mayor's chair.
Wow. So he will be willing. He will be willing to win a seat as an MPP and basically immediately start campaigning to be mayor of Toronto if he's not premier.
Yeah. That's my prediction. Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty grim. I must say. One more.
Well, he's an opportunist. He's nothing if not an opportunist, Glenn. I think he saw Brown's resignation as an opportunity.
True enough. In the last, let's see, what day was this? This was on March 13th, so that was yesterday. The Campaign Life Coalition decided to make a big splashy statement that how much they helped Doug Ford win. And then somehow when Doug Ford gets questioned about the social conservative aspects of what he had spoken of in the campaign for leader, now he says, well, it's not really a priority to me, but if any private member's bill comes along, oh, well, that's a different story. Like, that's old hat now, isn't it? Doesn't everybody understand? I mean, Harper Chrétien started this stuff. Well, private members' bills, then it's one by one. Yeah, well, you know how it works.
Yeah, we'll have free votes.
If it's not from cabinet, it doesn't pass. That's how things work, man. So
and especially considering whether or not Doug Ford is pro-choice or pro-life or whatever is irrelevant, considering it's a federally regulated issue that's covered under federal law, the criminal code, and the Charter of Rights. Unless Doug Ford's willing to have a constitutional battle, which I don't think he is because he's not smart enough, it's not going to be. It's a non-issue. It really is. It was a vote buyer, and that was it.
That's a very good point, Dave. I don't know why people and why the media don't inform people what the jurisdictions are in this country, because it seems like I've even seen. Go ahead.
It doesn't sell papers. That's why. If somebody says something outlandish, you got to jump on it. You'll get 2 days worth of pretty good press on it. You'll get a couple of spikes in your readership. Even though people in the know, people who pay attention know.
That's sad. Now, there's something else do you think that Doug Ford is going to get favorable media exposure? Can he count on that? Kind of another Trump thing.
No.
Free media. No?
No. I don't think he's going to get, again, as far as Trump went, Trump didn't get favorable media coverage. He got, oh my God, I can't believe what this train wreck is saying today kind of coverage. Maybe we'll get some of that with Doug Ford.
Okay. Now,
I mean, Trump got millions of dollars worth of free advertising Donald Trump received, and it was bad advertising. It was advertising talking about, but then he was able to spin that, right? Doug Ford may attempt the same thing.
Okay. Now, on March 12th, when Queen's Park opened up again, there was Doug Ford outside, but his reasoning is as follows. I have to be out there nonstop. As my dad always said, in business, you aren't getting sales in the office. You've got to get sales outside. We're going to be out on the road. You won't see me in here too often. Well, you don't have a seat, Doug.
That's right.
What the hell? What are you going to do? You going to loiter? I mean,
he can be up. He'll be in the galleries, sending signals from the gallery,
tweeting.
Yeah.
So he's going to leave.
Taking photos, Instagramming.
Well, he says he's going to leave the work in the legislature to Vic Fideli. It seems that the caucus is going to go along, but do you think that might be partly Fideli said, why don't you just let us do what we do here and you go do what you have to do?
Probably.
I think that's fine.
Yeah, I think he's probably taken Fideli's advice, given that Fideli has a seat. We're going to work with you from inside the ledge, and you go out and build the brand.
Okay. I estimate it will be within the next 10 days when Doug Ford will directly contradict the PC position inside the legislature.
Yeah, probably. Maybe sooner. Don't forget, they haven't come up with a formal platform now. They've abandoned the People's Guarantee, and now they're going for a smaller, streamlined platform. That's not going to be high on facts and really heavy on the hyperbole and rhetoric. They've already said that essentially.
Okay.
So if it doesn't jive with his new platform, he's going to come out against it for sure. It could be days.
So then that would tell me that right now the Wynne government probably has pretty much of a free ride with showcasing whatever legislation they want to before the end of the session. Mm-hmm. Well, most importantly of which is a budget, which we still don't have.
That's right, and it's supposed to be coming down next week or the week. It'll be by the end of the month.
Okay. Now, because this is a fixed election on June 7th,
mm-hmm.
the day that the writ drops is also fixed, and that's May 9th. So
that's right.
The legislature either dissolves on that day or before that if the premier moves to dissolve the House. So, I mean, we're already halfway through March. We're talking at the very most a little more than 5 weeks. Do you think it'll go that long? Right. Or will they let the campaigns begin early?
Well, they've already started campaigning. Let's be honest with ourselves. Formally campaigning, no. Or do we have lawn signs? No. But they're already campaigning, and let's face it. But I think what we're going to see in terms of the budget, they've already pretty much outlined what the budget's going to be. They're expanding some programs and some funding for some programs. But this isn't going to be, at least I don't think, they're going to be foolish enough to put out what would be typically an election budget, which is, we're going to throw everything out with the kitchen sink. But I do think we're going to see some additional funding in areas which needs it right away, like mental health, for instance. As far as that, I think we're going to see probably a pretty much a stay the course kind of budget, something that won't piss off the voters.
Okay. And as far as which way they may venture to look for more converts, they'll be going left, not right. You think so?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I see them becoming a little more progressive. I mean, you got to remember something. We had conservatives in power in this province for 42 years. Okay, a lot of people don't realize that. I mean, you guys had them for 40 plus years. We had them for 40 plus years here as well. And the main reason we had them for as long as we did was because they tacked left. Whenever they needed to, they tacked left. We were the first province in the country to fund separate schools, for instance. Right? Mm-hmm. That's not exactly a conservative mantra. That is definitely progressive conservative. There are no more progressive conservatives. The progressive conservatives are what are called purple liberals now. And they're people who believe in fiscal conservatism, but you can't be a curmudgeon, right? You have to be able to provide people progressive coverage, which is what we're seeing in this province right now. I mean, for the people that harken back to the days of Bill Davis, like I talk about a lot on my show. I mean, I look at the progressive liberal policies that we have currently, and I think of Bill Davis. I mean, even if I was a progressive conservative in this province, I'd look at what the conservatives are putting out, especially after Mike Harris, and then think, okay, do I want to go further to the right and slash and burn, or do I want to, prop up the existing services and maybe expand on them a bit? I'd like to see that. So I think that's what a lot of voters in the province are looking at right now.
And the incumbent government would definitely be best positioned to be able to figure out how to do that and be able to present it as believable, right?
Well, yeah, they know how much money they have to play with, right? I mean, that's the other thing about being the incumbent. You actually know how much money you have to play with. When you're an opposition leader, you can promise the moon because you have no idea how much money. And then when you can't come through with your promises, you can always blame the previous government. I mean, that's what George W. Bush did, for crying out loud, right? He promised the moon and the stars, and all he could produce was, the occasional moon rock and some stardust, but he blamed it on the previous government, even though Clinton left him a huge surplus, just like Chrétien, right?
Yes, just like the Liberals left the Conservatives. And that sort of backpedaling, we saw that from Notley in Alberta when she finally got the book. We saw it from Horgan in BC when he finally got the book. Well,
and let's be honest, both those provinces have been basically undermined by their governments, right? I mean, you can't continue to cut taxes and then say to people, oh, don't worry, we'll continue to provide your services. Bullshit. There's no money. How are you going to do that? I mean, what was happening under Christy Clark in BC was, frankly, criminal. Yep. I mean, if that had been the United States, she should have been arrested under the RICO Act, for crying out loud. I mean, what they were doing was just, I mean, oh my God. It was like the mafia wasn't charged out there, man. It was bizarre. And now people are all like, oh, you promised you would do this and you promised you'd do that. And Horgan's like, I didn't know that we were so bankrupt. You know, I didn't realize they'd sold the house out from under us. I just thought they'd taken out a mortgage. I didn't realize we were actually renting our own home at this point.
Well, we should turn towards where they can take their policy, because obviously the People's Guarantee is out, but something we saw from all the leadership candidates, they're all against the carbon tax plan that was in the People's Guarantee. And when Brown came out with that, it was a big deal. It did get some reaction because it was a change. It was a movement. And he said, well, the federal system's coming anyway. He didn't like the cap and trade market that Ontario's in, and he was going to replace it. Well, now we have the leader of the PCs who say, no cap and trade, no carbon tax. Let's go to court. Okay, well, never mind.
So here's the thing. So here's the thing. Ahead. When you if it's carbon tax, then that's a steady stream of revenue, right? The cap and trade implies that the amount of money you get is going to reduce over time because greenhouse gas emissions will reduce because people don't want to pay the fee, right, or have to buy the carbon credits. So the reason why cap and trade works better on a global scheme is because the goal is to reduce greenhouse gases. A carbon tax is simply taxing carbon. I mean, that's a new tax. This is the very thing they accuse the Liberals of, creating a new tax. It's not a new tax. Cap and trade's not a tax, right? It is, but it isn't. It's one of these things where you can reduce the amount of money you're paying by simply reducing your greenhouse gases. Eventually, there will be no money in a cap and trade system because people will have complied and they'll have reduced their greenhouse gases to the point where, now there are some industries that can't, but they can buy the credits. That's where the money for the credits is coming from. I mean, that's why people like Al Gore talk about the cap and trade system, why California does it, why Quebec does it, because it's not repressive. A carbon tax is a repressive tax. And the reality is with a carbon tax, it's actually the consumer who ends up paying the tax, not the emitter. The polluter continues to pay, and it's the person at the end of the line who makes the payment on that. So the polluter gets to pay for free. No wonder they want a carbon tax.
Indeed. But the issue with even what Brown brought forward is it would have put a huge hole in the revenues of the Ontario government. And his carbon tax left a $4 billion hole a year. Yep. Now they want to get rid of cap and trade as well. There's no way they can raise $6 or $7 extra billion a year in revenue. Where the hell are they going to find? Ooh, $9 billion. $9 billion is the estimated value of the cap and trade program as it is right now. $9 billion. So they not only do they want to get rid of the $9 billion, they don't want to bring anything in to replace it. So so that's less money for schools, hospitals, infrastructure, courts, right? I mean, we have a good backlog in this province right now with courts. Where's the money coming from for those? Well, I mean, Ontario's seen it before with Harris. Alberta's seen it with Klein. They saw it with Clark.
Yeah.
There's only one way for these types of governments to do anything close to what they're promising, and that's with the massive cuts in services and employees. There's no way around it. What are they going to cut in Ontario?
Well, it's already been estimated that 40,000 public sector jobs will be lost under the Conservatives. 40,000 jobs. And by the way, those are good paying jobs, high tax paying jobs. You know, we're not talking about people who are, wondering if you want fries with that order. We're talking about people who are making, $30 an hour, engineers. We're talking about people in long-term positions that are going to have to be paid out. One of the things that cost Harris so much money, was that they had to let people go, but then they had to give them severance. That was a huge tax burden. And there was nowhere to replace that money from because, of course, they'd already given a tax cut. You simply can't tax cut your way to prosperity. It doesn't work that way.
So if
they've been talking about waste. All four of the candidates said the same thing. We gotta get rid of the waste. You got to get rid of the waste. I don't know what waste they're talking about. And if they're aware of waste, why aren't they talking about it in the opposition benches? Why aren't they saying, well, we're aware of this much waste. What's the province doing about that? No, they rail about this mysterious waste. It's the same as the gravy train, right? It sounds great. And every time I talk to constituents, the biggest complaint they have, frankly, I have a guy who calls my show regularly, and he's always outraged, but he's outraged about the government waste, right? And I say to him, well, where is this waste you talk of? What do you mean waste? Well, they do this and this. I said, well, no, they don't do that anymore, right? So where is this waste they're talking about? That's the thing I want. I can't wait to find out where the waste is.
Well, they'll come up with something that they don't like and call it waste. That's what Alberta was so good at.
Yeah, exactly. And Mike Harris did the same thing in Ontario when he let go of all those public sector workers and picked a fight with school teachers and doctors and nurses and closed hospitals and closed down the mental health facilities, where we used to keep people in care. All those places were closed. They downloaded public housing to the municipalities. Municipalities whose only source of revenue is property taxes. They're now on the hook for millions of dollars to cover the cost of subsidized housing. Where's the logic in that? Oh, well, at least the province doesn't have to pay for it. We're cutting your taxes. No, you're not. You're just transferring it. All you're doing is moving the deck chairs on the Titanic, man.
Well, that's just it. At the end of the day, there is only one taxpayer.
That's right.
There was a column that came out today in all places, somewhere I don't usually peruse, National Post, Jack Bowen, and he had the first hints of what Ford thinks the quote-unquote shorter and clearer PC election platform is going to be. At least everybody's admitting at this point that platform was created by someone who's very different than Doug Ford. So, okay, yeah, I'll go along with that. But there's a few key areas that Ford wants to emphasize. And this is from unnamed sources within the Ford team. He's more of a 5 big things kind of guy than a laundry list of 1,000 commitments. In terms of how he likes to campaign, it's a shorter and clearer list. Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is lock her up, build the wall. Is this his 5 big things strategy?
I don't think it's
five slogans that have no basis in reality.
That's a very good question, and I'm sure Doug Ford could have somebody answer that for you. I don't think he could, but I think he could definitely have someone do that for you. As far as his strategy goes, look, he's saying the same thing. We're going to reduce hydro costs because the hydro is too high. It's the highest in the world, even though that's way off base. Again, facts don't matter to these people, right? He's going to diminish the waste. He's going to get rid of the LINs. As I mentioned that earlier in the show, the LIN, which is a local health integration network, which it's a program by which funding is directed in your area to areas of specific need. So if you needed more money in your hospital, the LIN would ensure that their budget, the bulk of it went to your hospital. If you need it more in community care, then it goes there. I mean, it was another level of bureaucracy, but for some people, it's an important level of bureaucracy. He talked about e-health. How, e-health was a big waste of money. Personally, I can tell you from personal experience that e-health has actually benefited Ontario. It's benefited me. When I have to go see my lung specialist in Toronto, he knows exactly what's been going on at my doctor's office because of e-health. All the records are there. He knows when I had my last x-ray. He knows when I had my last blood test. All of that's there. He doesn't have to call them to have them send over a report. It's all there. It's all online. It's accessed through e-health. So for the people out there that say e-health is a waste of money, again, they obviously don't realize the benefit that they've received from e-health. But what are you going to do, right?
Well,
you can't force.
Well, I think the advantage to picking on things like that is they're counting on the majority of the target audience not really having any health issues. They're not people who have to see specialists or have some sort of disability or anything like that. They're looking for the healthy, normal people that have no idea what it's like for other people. It's a very, very oversimplification of the program, but it seems to work with their demographic, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Well, and again, we're talking about people, especially the donor class. These are people who have money. If they get sick, they don't have to rely on our doctors. They can go somewhere else. The strange thing for me, and I got to point this out, because one of the strangest things I have discovered in my time, especially living out here in rural Ontario, I know people who are on disability, they've been on disability for eons, and they vote Conservative. I go, why do you vote Conservative? Oh, well, they balance the books. I go, when? When do they balance the books? They're good with the economy. Really? When? Oh, well, all those people that are mooching on welfare. I go, wait a minute, you're on disability. If you get ODSP, it's mind blowing to me. The people that actually require and rely and depend on the services the provincial government provides are the people who are more than willing to vote against the provincial government providing those services. It just astounds me, Glenn.
I know it is a phenomenon. I don't think there's any other word to put it. But as far, this here from Jack Boland, he's just basically trying to come up with parameters according to what Doug Ford has said through the leadership campaign. And since he's become leader, he said he will cut 4% from the province's $141 billion budget. That's $5.6 billion. He hasn't offered any specifics, but says he will review spending line by line and implement efficiencies. And the Liberals counter with, there's only one way you do that, and that's by firing people. So nobody should be surprised.
So but you can't get these guys to admit that that's the thing, right? You can't get, we're going to find efficiencies. So what does that mean exactly? Well, we're going to find efficiencies. So why don't you be honest with the voters and tell them you're going to fire people? Because, really, that's the only way you're going to find efficiencies. Well, we're going to get, instead of having 5 people do this job, we're going to have 3 people do the work of 5 people. So not only have you created an efficiency, but now you're putting those 3 people in a position where they've got to work that much harder to do the work of 5 people. And, you're going to have mistakes along the way. You're going to have, you're just asking for problems. You're asking for problems. If they didn't need 5 people, they wouldn't have 5 people. That presumes that the government has this abundance of workers who are just sitting around all day twiddling their thumbs, which we know isn't true. I have friends who work for various ministries in this province. They can tell me about waste. One of the biggest problems we have in this province is, the preferred contractor status. All right, I can't remember; those aren't the exact words, but when you have someone who is a supplier to the province, okay. So they got in to be the supplier to the province because they gave a low bid, okay. But that doesn't guarantee. That's like Walmart. Walmart says they have the lowest prices, but they don't actually. Not always. Maybe they may have the lowest price on a bottle of Coke, but if you want something important, you're going to pay a little more. Well, that's what you get with these preferred contracts. I talked to a friend of mine who works for one of the ministries, and he says, look, we could just as easily go down to Staples, which is 2 doors down from my office, and buy these things and save, 30%, literally. But we're not allowed to because we have to use the preferred supplier of the province. Well, so that guy undercut on the initial bid, but since then the prices have been going up steadily. Why? Because he's a government contractor. People, this is the thing. I said to my friend, I said, well, maybe there needs to be a way because, you got to remember, whenever you save money in your department, I said to him, as a taxpayer, you're actually saving money. You're saving the taxpayer money. You're a taxpayer. Shouldn't you want to save money? Sounds logical to me. And he said, no, that's very logical. He says, but the problem is the way the system works, you can't do that. Right? If you allocate extra, because first of all, they ask you for your budget. This is every ministry. So they say to you, okay, so it's fiscal 2018, 2019 right now. So in the middle of the year, just before June, just before the provincial election, actually, they're going to ask them to put together their wish list for next year, fiscal year 2018, 29, or 2019, 2020. How much is that budget for? And how much money you're going to need? Well, nobody knows a year in advance how much money they're going to need the following year. You don't even know how much money you needed this year. You had to put a guesstimation in. So part of the problem is, there's no incentive, because you can't incentivize these people. If you incentivize them by giving them a bonus if they save money, well, then are they going to be focused on their job or focused on saving money so they get a bonus? Right? So this is where it's sort of a paradigm. It's almost impossible to fix, really.
Well, we saw that scourge with the Harper government and their control of assistant deputy ministers and deputy ministers with not spending huge pieces of their ministry's budget, returning it to Treasury, and they get a six-figure bonus.
Right.
Can't have that. So
well, of course. So what did those bonuses lead to? Those bonuses led to big boners, if you will, mistakes in various ministries. I mean, look what happened with veterans in this country. Right? Mm-hmm. They're still in court on this. I mean, the current government is still fighting them in court over this.
Yep.
Right? Because the government said, we're going to save a whole bunch of money. But you didn't save money. You didn't actually save any money. Now you're costing us more money. So, I mean, beware of, like you said, when you hear this all the time as a child, if it sounds too good to be true, guess what? It is.
Now, as far as healthcare goes, at one of the two debates, Ford said he would provide help and more resources to the healthcare system. But then he said his focus would be on listening to frontline workers to find efficiencies and deliver better services. No details, no nothing. Just hot air.
Right. Oh, that's rhetoric and hyperbole. I talked about it earlier. And then we know what efficiency. I mean, efficiencies, as we all know, is a code word for slash and burn.
As far as abortion goes, Ford said he would welcome any member who brought forward a bill requiring parental consent before minors undergo abortions, but said he was not angling. He said he was not angling to revive the abortion question. Well, then shut up.
I don't want to revive the abortion question, but if somebody else wants to bring it up, I'm more than happy to sit around and listen.
That is just so blatantly incendiary.
Well, we talked about it a moment ago, Glenn. I mean, the reality is it's a federal government matter. It's not a provincial government matter. Even if they brought forth a private member's bill, it doesn't matter. It's not going to change the Supreme Court of Canada's decision. It's not going to get rid of the right to a choice that women have in this country. This is, again, it's not in the provincial government's wheelhouse. But it's nothing for these progressive conservatives provincially to talk about things that are not within their purview. They love to bring up issues that are federally mandated, that they say they're going to fix. There's nothing they can do to fix it.
Well, the worst case scenario would be that they deny funding to abortion services, and then that would only end them up in the court with the government of Canada.
That's right.
Yeah, that sounds like a good business model. As far as business goes, Ford said he would offer tax incentives as well as the old favorite cut red tape to attract businesses to Ontario, but insisted that it would not be corporate welfare, something he said he opposes. Well, what do you call a tax incentive? It is corporate welfare.
Well,
so again,
a rose by any other name, Glenn.
Wow.
A rose by any other name would still be corporate welfare. But this is the party of the corporation, right? I mean, let's not kid ourselves.
He started to hint that there might be something about merging school boards. In one debate, he said that the Catholic and public school boards in the Peel region, west of Toronto, each had adjacent Taj Mahal headquarters. He seemed to suggest the two systems should share administrative functions. Why can't they have one Taj Mahal instead of two Taj Mahals? That's classic Doug Ford, isn't it?
Why can't we have one Board of Education instead of two?
Is this folksy?
I mean, why are we publicly funding two school boards in this province? That's the question I've been asking for a generation. I mean, like I said, I told you, Bill Davis did it to get votes, right?
Yeah.
He was told by the Archbishop of the Toronto Diocese that if he didn't allow for the Catholic parents, because they were sending their kids to separate school anyway, but if he didn't allow for the provincial government to allow them to direct their provincial school dollars to a separate school board, he was going to encourage his parishioners from the pulpit to not vote for him. Well, guess what? All of a sudden, we got separate school funding. That's how that happened.
And you got Premier Davis.
And we got Premier Davis, exactly. Who, by the way, was a great premier. I got to say, I mean, if we still had progressives like Bill Davis around, I probably would be voting Conservative right now. You know, I mean, it was a progressive Conservative party. They provided, cradle to grave services. We had some of the finest education in the country. Great universities. Everything was properly topped up. The taxes were probably a little higher than some people would like, but the reality is, you know what? It's those taxes. When you have the many pay for everything, right? When everybody's paying for it, the price goes down, right?
Yeah.
That's the value of bulk purchasing. I mean, if that wasn't true, people wouldn't shop at Costco, for crying out loud.
Well, as it stands now, the Progressive Conservatives are still ahead in every poll, even though Doug Ford is now the leader. As far as leader approval, leader trust ratings go, he's not at the top. I don't expect to ever see him there. As we said near the beginning, I think he can only go down from where he came in. Do you think there's enough momentum, progressive conservative machine, that they have a very good chance of winning a majority no matter what Doug Ford says, or Doug Ford has to be behaving?
I think what we'll see is perhaps a Conservative minority government where they're going to need the Liberals to support them. I think that, in my humble opinion, that's the worst case scenario. I don't see the Conservatives getting a majority. I really don't. I know what the polls are saying. I've looked at what my own writing says. I don't think my incumbent's going to lose. I honestly don't. Not if he's able to point to the realities, I mean, look at this facility we just built. Look at this we built in the last 3 years. Look at the fact that, I mean, even my own MPP, he lives on a small street in a rural area. He was paying a lot of money for his hydro, a lot. He admitted it. Look, man, my hydro is ridiculous. But I live on a street where there's 7 people, right? These are the same people who still expect to have full on-the-grid coverage but don't want to pay for it. The reality is if you live in a rural area where there's 7 people, I mean, what's it cost to run the poles, to run the lines, to maintain the transformers and the transmission to you and your 6 neighbors? That's not cheap. It's not free. Someone's got to pay for it.
Yeah.
I mean, the issue for hydro for me, hydro is so expensive. How much money the provincial government has spent over the last decade to upgrade and to repair the hydro that was allowed to decay over successive governments that didn't put any money in infrastructure? $90 billion is an estimated number.
Well, I mean, isn't that part of the game? Isn't that part of the election game? You just hope you're not the one who's in power when passing the buck has to stop, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this is the thing. I mean, people of the province can complain about hydro, but the reality is we haven't had a blackout in 5 years. We haven't had a brownout. When you walk to your switch and flick it on, the lights come on.
No,
even if you live on a street with 6 people. Okay?
That's true.
I saw a letter today. I saw a guy today post a thing on Twitter. Look at my hydro bill. I haven't even been in my cottage for 8 months, and my hydro bill is $119. Yeah, it's delivery costs, buddy. All right? You're talking about your cottage. Your cottage. You're lucky to be even on the fucking grid. Excuse my language. You're lucky to be on the grid.
True enough.
You are.
True enough. And
So
that's not
that's
welfare,
not free.
so somebody's going to pay for it.
Exactly. It's not free. Hey, this is the thing. Americans say this to me all the time. Oh, you live in Canada where everything's free. I'm like, are you high? Nothing's free. There's nothing free. We pay for our health care. We all pay for it. That's why it's so it works as well as it does. And I mean, Ontario has some of the lowest wait times anywhere in the country. Are there still hallway patients? Yes. Yes, there are still hallway patients. And until we can find a way to until we can raise the taxes that are necessary to cover those costs, and there's the word nobody wants to talk about, raising taxes. Ooh, that's the boogeyman. I mean, think about this for a second. We look at things through two lenses: good politics and good policies. And sometimes you get both. Oftentimes you get one or the other. A good example would be reducing the GST by 2%, right? Was it good politics? Yeah. Absolutely. Helped Stephen Harper get a majority. Was it bad policy? Absolutely. It left $27 billion out of the federal coffers. They created their own deficit by reducing it. If Justin Trudeau raised the GST by 1%, we would be in balance tomorrow. We would actually have a surplus this year. If he put it back to 2% that was reduced, well, we would be in surplus in perpetuity. That's just how it works. You need money to pay for services. If no one's willing to pay, if no one's willing to pay the money, someone's got to pay the check, man.
Well, that's just it. Parties are too concerned about the cost of votes, not the cost of policy. Now, I know it's going to be I know it's going to be interesting as we go forward. Who knows? The budget comes out. That's going to be another big clue. I'm going to keep doing shows about the Ontario election as it gets closer. Of course, you're welcome to come back. But I want, because you can do it fastest and without mistakes, tell everybody about...
Well, I call my show Canada's Only Holistic Political Chat. And the reason I say that is because I believe in the interconnectedness of all things, especially all things political. What happens in Ontario will definitely affect what happens in Alberta and vice versa. What happens in Canada will be affected by what happens in the United States or what happens in India, for instance. It's all things are connected, right? The most ironic part about that is you look at Stephen Hawking, who died yesterday. Well, he died on Einstein's birthday. Isn't that ironic? Yep. It's the interconnectedness of all things. You know what? No, we are all part of the same thing, all of us. And that's what my show is about. That's why I call it Canada's Only Holistic Political Chat, because I don't just discuss politics. I talk about sport, entertainment. I talk a lot about politics and a lot of foreign politics. People say to me, why do you talk about Syria? What's that got to do with Ontario? Well, we just welcomed a whole raft of Syrian refugees. That's what it has to do with Ontario,
Yep.
That's why it is what it is. And I talk about issues that nobody wants to talk about. Like I'll talk about Israel. People don't like it when you talk about Israel, but I do it. The only complaint I ever had was from somebody who didn't actually hear my show, but he heard from someone who heard my show that I had talked about Israel in a not so positive light. Oh, well, next thing you know, they were threatening to have me pulled off the air. And all I was doing was reading the news.
Interesting.
Okay? I'm not afraid to speak the truth. I'm not afraid to bring the truth to people. And I'm willing to ask questions that nobody's willing to ask. I interviewed Judith Poe, who was Serena Shim's mom. Many people don't know who Serena Shim was. She was a journalist who was murdered by the Turkish government in 2014 because she had video and audio evidence of the Turkish government offering aid and support to Daesh. All right? They had actual terrorist training camps on the Turkish side of the Syrian border that were supposed to be for refugees that were in fact Daesh training camps that the Turkish government was using to train and arm, and they were moving men and material across the Syrian border from Turkey in World Health Organization trucks. She had video of this. She had audio interviews from people in the camps. She was murdered. Now, I had her mom on my show because that is an important issue. Because if you can't tell the truth to the world, and if the world's not willing to listen to the truth, well then, where are we as a world? So that's why I call my show Canada's Only Holistic Political Chat. Because if it's political, I will talk about it.
Makes a lot of sense to me. Of course, listeners to the view up here will know all about Serena Shim and Judith Poe.
Absolutely.
I've had Judith on. I've had Serena's sister on, her best friend in Lebanon. It's something that we're not gonna let it die. There's no way. It just can't.
We
now,
can't. We can't.
Where
The truth is always the first victim of war is always the truth, and we can't let that victim die in vain. We can't let the truth be a victim that no one's willing to stand up for.
Absolutely. Now, where can people hear your show?
Well, you can listen to us every day. I'm on from Monday to Friday, 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Northumberland 89.7. You can get us online at northumberland897.ca. Just click the Listen Live button, and you can listen from anywhere in the world, from anywhere in North America. For sure, I get callers from Florida every now and then. They can listen to us on the Radio Player app.
There you go. The magic of internet radio, I guess.
The World Wide Web. Absolutely. Bringing all our audiences together.
For better or
bringing
for worse.
Our audiences together. Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much, Dave. I appreciate the time and the content, and I'm sure we'll be doing this again at some point.
Well, I'm sure we will. Perhaps after the budget comes down, and maybe when we have a platform from Doug Ford that's, let's face it, it's going to come out on a napkin, so.
We'll handle that when we come to it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Glenn. Take care.
Okay, there we go. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I have no idea what's next week. That's nothing new. Who knows? We'll see. Thanks for listening to The View Up Here. Good night.